first to our top story. Any moment now, Sean Diddy Combs could learn his fate. The music mogul is set to be sentenced this morning for the 2 felony counts he was found guilty of back in July. The hearing is getting underway right now here in New York City. Moments ago, we saw members of his family arrive at the courthouse and walk inside. Ahead of the sentencing, Combs made a last-ditch effort to plead for mercy. Last night, he sent a letter to the judge asking for leniency, begging, in fact, for leniency, and it comes just days after his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, penned her own letter asking the judge to deliver a sentence that reflects her, quote, experience as a victim. Combs' legal team also released a video last night that will play in court. I want to show you a clip of that.
What I want to do with my freedom is, make sure that I can make change. I just got so excited because this is truly a dream come true for me. And I'm happy to say this is our 3rd school. We have opened this official.
All right, I want to bring in CBS News national correspondent Jerika Duncan, who is joining me live from outside the courthouse. So, Jerika, 2 things can be true. The Diddy team can put that video into the record that shows his philanthropic endeavors before he was accused of these crimes, but the accusations and the convictions still stand. The man is more than just 1 or 2 things.
That's absolutely correct, Vlad. And that video, it was a different version of Sean Combs that the judge will see, that the court will see, that was entered in as evidence for this sentencing. So we know a lot of letters were sent from victims, people who will be speaking, saying that Combs abused them physically, sexually. You heard from Cassie Ventura in her letter saying that she's concerned about retribution because she spoke out, and others who've expressed a similar sentiment. But as far as Combs is concerned, this was his opportunity to be heard because, we did not hear from him during the trial. We didn't hear from any witnesses on the defense side during the trial. So this was his turn to say, I apologize for what I've done. I'm sincerely saddened by it. He recognized that he caused people hurt. He talked about his children, his 7 children, and saying that 4 of those children lost their mother, Kim Porter, in 2018, and I am their only parent. He talked about being sober for the first time in 25 years and said that he wants to do better, and he promised not to ever commit any more crimes. So this was a moment, again, that video showing really he's saying I could be more helpful out in the community than behind bars. His defense team asking for 14 months, also considering time served, so they want him out very soon. Meanwhile, the prosecutors are saying he should be behind bars for at least 11 years, about 11 years.
So the other news that you have for us, Jerika, is the Combs is facing this new lawsuit from a former stylist. You spoke exclusively with him. What did he tell you?
That's right. So Deontay Nash worked for Combs from 2008 to about 2018, and he was a stylist for Combs and also Cassie Ventura, Combs' ex-girlfriend. So he describes being fearful, he says, of Combs, and saying that he had all of the cards, he had all of the control, and he said that he was physically and sexually and emotionally abused by Combs. We spoke to him on Monday in Los Angeles. Take a listen to some of what he described in reference to being strangled, he said, on multiple occasions.
Cassie was shooting a video, I love it, and we went to like a restaurant the night before. He just came in with such a bad attitude, so I just left the room, you know what I mean? And I went outside to smoke a cigarette. Don't know how he found me. My back was turned. The next thing I know, he's coming up to me and grabbing me and choking me and throwing me on the car. Didn't I tell y'all don't need to be going out? I'm like, Jesus Christ, and he's like choking me out.
For all the people or questions about why you didn't leave, why you didn't quit or call the police, what stopped you from taking action much sooner?
We were frightened. I was frightened the whole time. I signed up for Bad Boy Entertainment, a record label. I didn't sign up for that kind of treatment. And it will last me for the rest of my life.
So Nash went on to give other examples of what he says he experienced, but it's important to note that Combs' team denies those allegations and called Nash an opportunist who uses his proximity to celebrity to get what he wants. Vlad?
All right, Jerika Duncan from outside of that courthouse, where any moment now we expect that there will be a sentence in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. All eyes on that courtroom, Tarika. I know we'll be talking with you throughout the course of the day. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, my friend. All right, for more analysis, let's bring in CBS legal contributor Caroline Polisi. So, Caroline, this last-minute letter and video from Combs' team, will that factor in at all into the judge's decision?
Yeah, not so much, Vlad. I mean, look, the sentencing judge has already received these voluminous memoranda from both the prosecution, the defense, and the probation department, which I think sort of gets lost in this discussion sometimes. The probation department issues what they believe are the guidelines that should be applied here, and they've recommended somewhere in the range of 5, 6, 7 years here. We know the prosecution has asked for upwards of 11 years, and then, of course, the defense would like to see essentially time served, 14 months. He's already served 13 behind bars. But rarely do you see that big of a discrepancy in what the guidelines are. And primarily that's coming down to this argument over whether or not this acquitted conduct, that is conduct that was presented to the jury during the trial of which he was acquitted, whether or not that can be taken into consideration by the judge. And so this video and the letter pretty much are going towards trying to move the judge to get some factors and ideas in there of what type of man Sean Combs was and has the ability to be. I don't think ultimately it will end up moving the needle, but it's certainly quite compelling, and you're seeing more and more of these highly produced sentencing videos at sentencing hearings like this.
The other thing, Caroline, is he's expected to address the court today. Of course, we know that he did not testify during his trial. Why speak out now? And in your experience, do you believe that the judge, and I'm asking you to speculate here, but do you believe that the judge will impose the maximum sentence?
Last question first. Definitely not the maximum sentence, because remember, the maximum sentence here is potentially 20 years, 10 years for each of those transportation to engage in prostitution charges. Very rarely, if you look at the sentences for first-time offenders that have gotten similar charges, none of them serve that amount of time. It's typically 2, 3, 4 years, maybe. But, you know, speaking at your sentencing versus speaking at your trial, completely different ball games. At trial, you are defending yourself. At sentencing, judges really like to see acceptance of responsibility. They like to see remorse and really rehabilitation. So it'll be quite different than actually testifying at a trial.
So really quickly, Caroline, before I let you go, when you do show that remorse, when you do show that self-reflection, has the judge already made up their minds as to what the sentence will be, or does that factor into then how they sentence you?
Yeah, typically in my experience, they already have made up their mind. But the reason for that, plea for saying that I have, shown remorse here, they want to get a 2-point reduction in those sentencing guidelines for acceptance of responsibility. It's pretty technical, but that's really what he's going for.
Got it. All right. Caroline Polisi, always with that great legal analysis. We appreciate you as always, friend. Thanks.
Happening right now, disgraced music mogul Sean Diddy Combs sits inside a New York City courtroom to hear his sentence following 2 months of bombshell testimonies against him. Combs was on trial earlier this year for a number of federal criminal charges. The jury found him guilty of the lesser charges in that trial. He will be sentenced today for 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. He was found not guilty on 1 count of racketeering and 2 counts of sex trafficking. Here's a live look outside the courthouse right now. We expect that sentence to come down very soon. Combs already made a last-minute plea for mercy ahead of today's hearing by submitting a 4-page letter asking the judge for leniency. CBS News senior coordinating producer for the Crime and Public Safety Unit, Anna Schechter, joins me now. Anna, thank you so much for your time today. We know there are no cameras in the courtroom, but can you walk us through what is happening right now and what is at stake for Combs?
Well, sure, a lot is at stake. This is the day that it is up to the judge to determine how much time he serves. Now, his defense team has asked for no more than 14 months. So that would, if the judge goes along with that, see him walking out, essentially out of jail next month. But the prosecution has asked for 11 years, more than 11 years. So you see this great discrepancy between what the government is asking the judge to do and what Combs's legal defense team wants. Take into consideration, Combs himself has submitted the letter, you just mentioned that, asking for leniency from the judge. His mother has also submitted a letter. His team wants to have his children speak in court today. That's in negotiation right now. The judge is deciding exactly how this is going to play out. It appears that one of the victims who was going to speak is now no longer going to speak today in court, so that could change how today plays out in court. But no matter what, by the end of the day, we expect to hear the sentence coming down from the judge, the very same judge that presided over that 2-week trial that we covered, in which he was acquitted on the more serious charges, but was convicted on these 2 prostitution-related charges. Mugo.
Yeah, Anna, earlier today, CBS News obtained a copy of the video that Combs intends to play for the judge. We want to show you some of that footage right now. Now, this video was filed by Combs' legal team. We should be getting to that video shortly. The documentary-style video is a montage of home videos showing Combs' family and some of his past charity work. And as we mentioned, Combs has already asked for leniency from the judge. We're seeing that video playing out on your screen right now. So, Anna, I guess the question here is, what's the goal for Combs, and just how much does a video like this affect sentencing?
Well, this was a big play by the defense team. They're going out on a bit of a limb here. What they want to do is portray Combs as a family man, as a contributor to the community, giving to charities and the like. You see him interacting with his family out in the community, raising awareness for causes that are important to him. So what they're trying to do is show this other side of Combs, which is in stark contrast to what the prosecution laid out for the jury and also for members of the public who saw somebody who wanted to maintain control of people, moving them around, essentially forcing them into sexual acts against their will. And so this video is really in stark contrast to that. What they are hoping, what his legal defense team hopes to do, is to change the hearts and minds of the public watching this to have a different perception, but also to influence the judge. So that is a bit of a gamble. It's unclear how the judge is going to react to them putting out this highly produced video that you're seeing on screen. So like I said before, it remains to be seen. This is all up to the judge right now. The jury has already spoken. He was convicted on these 2 prostitution-related charges. Now it's up to the judge to decide how long he spends in prison. Is it going to be that 11 years that prosecution asked for? Is it going to be just another month like what his defense team is suggesting? Or is it going to be something totally different? It's really up to the judge. The 2 prostitution charges that he was convicted on could carry 10 years in prison each. So it's really a big range. I suppose the judge could even decide that he could walk out tomorrow. So a lot is at stake here, and his defense team really put a lot out on the line releasing this video. We'll see if it had the desired effect that his defense team wanted.
And let's talk about his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. We obviously know she was a key witness in the entire trial, and she asked the judge to deliver a sentence that reflects her, quote, experience as a victim. She says she fears for her life if he is released. So do victims have any options here? Do they have any say in this?
Well, it's a great question. There are nonprofit organizations that provide support for victims of domestic violence, domestic abuse, and it's likely an organization like that would potentially have to be the ones to step in and help, because for her, she can go to the police and say she feels unsafe and try to get a support system around her. But there are some support groups that can help with that. And then if a person has means, I suppose she could herself step up security. That is very expensive for an individual to cover. So this is really an issue that society is grappling with. Domestic violence is an issue that is widespread. Between 500,000 and 1 million people in America every year report being a victim of domestic violence. So, that's a lot of people. So there are groups that do help them, but she's in a tricky spot because she's so publicly participated in this trial, and she's scared about retribution according to that letter. So she's got to be sitting at home and watching this as well, she and other victims who have spoken up.
All right, Anna Schechter, we'll see you throughout the show today. Thank you so much for your time. Can you give us an update about what we know and what we're learning about the proceedings so far?
Sure. Well, a lot is underway, Mugo. Right as we're speaking now, the prosecution, the government is arguing why they believe this 11 years is what is required here. They're describing years of misconduct that they're characterizing, those freak-offs that occurred over years, abuse and violence that happened within these long-term relationships that we learned about during the trial. So they've really made their case, and then the defense, of course, has reminded the judge about the acquittal on those 2 more serious charges that the jury decided he did not commit. Now, the judge did speak and said that the court has done its own analysis of the sentencing guidelines. Then it appears that a little bit more than 5 years, 5.8 years, so just under 6 years, and 7.25 years. That would be sort of the general range for these crimes. So giving us maybe a little bit of a clue. That's right in the middle, in between what the defense is asking for and what the prosecution is asking for. So all of this discussion is underway. We will likely hear from members of Combs' family today, but the prosecution has had a long time to lay out and tell the judge why they believe that more than 11 years is what is required for sentencing in this case, Mugo.
And Anna, we're also hearing from victims. We know our Jerica Duncan, she spoke to the former stylist for Combs, and he is now suing Combs for alleged sexual abuse and violence. And we want to play some of that sound, and Anna will talk to you on the other side.
This has been a really bad 2 years for me. Very bad. Probably the worst since I left in 2018. It's like I'm reliving it all over again.
So as sentencing day approaches, your hope for the future is what? Outside of healing for yourself, for other people who were involved, but what is your hope for the future?
I hope that the sentence is something good enough for the victims to get some peace.
Okay, Anna, so can any of the evidence used during this federal trial, can that be used in this new lawsuit?
It's a great question, and I just want to remind everyone this is not the only lawsuit that's been filed against Diddy. This is the latest in a series of suits. And each case is a little bit different, but certainly all of the alleged misconduct that played out during the trial, that's in the public domain. And so that is essentially fair game to be used in suits like the one we're talking about with this former stylist. So since everything was so public, there were news reports about it, reporters in that courtroom. There is a lot of material, a lot of that's out there, and that's partly why his defense team wanted to put out that video that they submitted to the court, and CBS News has obtained that, painting him as a family man, as an upstanding and pillar of the community, giving to local charities and the like, supporting causes that he believes in. So the defense team is trying to counter this narrative painted not only in this federal trial, but in a multitude of other suits. Now, some of those civil suits have been thrown out. Others have been going through the legal process. So this is yet another one, somebody who says he was victimized over a period of time and is bringing a suit. Now, some of these victims are banding together because they were dismayed that those more serious charges of racketeering and sex trafficking were essentially thrown out. He was acquitted on those charges by a jury, Mugo. And so they want to see justice, and for them that means more time. But I'll also remind our viewers that there have been also letters of support submitted to the court. People who said, I was interviewed by the prosecutorial team. They were trying to paint me as a victim because I attended those parties, and I don't see myself as a victim. So there's a lot of evidence, a lot of information for the court to be weighing. That is all happening right now as we're speaking, Lugo.
All right, Anna Schechter, thank you. Anna, we know there are no cameras in the courtroom, but can you walk us through what's happening right now and what is at stake for Combs?
Well, right now his legal defense team is laying out their argument for why they believe that his sentencing should account to no more than 14 months, including time served. They are essentially rebutting what the prosecutorial team laid out just minutes ago. They argue that he should have at least 11 years in prison for the crimes they're alleging that he committed. And they brought up other cases where others have been convicted of transporting individuals over state lines for the purpose of prostitution, and cited those lengthy sentences that those individuals got. Now, the defense team right now, right as we are talking right now, Mugo, from what we hear from our team in court, the defense is arguing that this particular case, Sean Combs, is completely different from those other defendants who were convicted of those crimes and sentenced to years in prison. So that's what's happening in court right now. We do expect to hear potentially from victims through victim statements. We also might hear from Sean Combs's children, his adult children are there in court with him today, his mother, his legal team. He's sitting there listening to all of this play out, and it's up to the judge, Mugo, to decide what the sentence will be.
Yeah, and Anna, earlier today, CBS News obtained a copy of the video that Combs intends to play for the judge. We want to show you some of that footage right now. And this video was filed by Combs' legal team. The documentary-style video is a montage of home videos showing Combs' family and some of his past charity work. And as we mentioned, Combs has already asked for leniency from the judge. Anna, what is the goal here for Combs, and just how much does a video like this actually affect sentencing?
Well, what his team is trying to do is paint a picture of him as a family man, as a upstanding member of society who's contributing to causes, helping members of the community, and they're hoping that that is going to affect this sentencing. And it's really down to one person, the judge. So it remains to be seen if this video helps or hurts his case. I expect that the judge is going to try to be impartial and not be affected one way or the other. In addition to this video, there have been letters of support submitted for the record to be taken into account. You also have, of course, victim statements, and then we had that 2-week trial where Cassie Ventura took the stand and described her experience. At the end of that 2-week trial, as you said earlier, the jury convicted him on the 2 prostitution-related charges, but acquitted him on the more serious charges of human trafficking and conspiracy, racketeering conspiracy, which could have carried up to life in prison. So right now we're looking at basically no more jail time to a little bit more than 11 years, and it very well could be somewhere in the middle. The judge said that the court is taking into account sentencing guidelines for these very crimes. And again, as I mentioned earlier, right now the prosecution and the defense have been given time to lay out their arguments for exactly what they believe that sentence should be and why.
All right, Anna Schechter, we'll wait for when that sentence officially comes down. Thank you so much for joining us.
Anna, good to have you with us. Can you give us an update on what you know is going on inside the proceedings so far?
Well, it's a dramatic day in court, Reed, and Sean Combs's defense attorney right now is getting emotional as she's describing to the judge all of the things that Sean Combs has done for the community, specifically for the Black community, to lift up this community. She used terms like breaking the chains of systemic racism. She is making this case that he has been an important member of society and that he does not deserve to serve the 11 years in prison that prosecution is asking for. And right before she started speaking, another defense attorney was making the argument, the legal argument, that he didn't make money off of transporting these people over state lines for prostitution. So it's essentially completely different from any other prostitution case, that he wasn't profiting off of this. He wasn't trafficking women or men to make money himself. And so they are getting a lot of time to lay out these arguments for the judge, doing everything that they can to get that sentence down as low as they can. We talked earlier about releasing that video, a montage of home videos portraying him as a family man and a contributing member of society, Reed.
Well, those are the arguments for him, but we're also hearing arguments against him, and some of the victims are talking. Our Jerika Duncan, in fact, spoke to the former stylist for Combs. As you know, he's now suing for alleged sexual abuse and violence. So let's listen to his claims and then talk about it on the other side. Go ahead.
This has been a really bad 2 years for me. Very bad. Probably the worst since I left in 2018. It's like I'm reliving it all over again.
So as sentencing day approaches, your hope for the future is what? Outside of healing for yourself, for other people who were involved, but what is your hope for the future?
I hope that the sentence is something good enough for the victims to get some peace.
So Anna, in that CBS Mornings exclusive with Jerika Duncan, he also said that he was afraid for his life. Can any of the evidence used in the federal trial be used in this new lawsuit?
Well, everything that's in the public domain, all that came out during that trial can be. And you heard during the trial from women who felt that their lives were at risk, that they felt threatened, that they couldn't speak out, they couldn't tell anyone. And that's exactly what we heard from this victim who spoke to our Jerika Duncan. He said that he had a go bag. He essentially had a bag with just a change of clothes and a toothbrush that he could grab if he had to sort of disappear. He had this feeling that if he did anything to upset Combs, that his life could be at risk. That's what he told Jerika Duncan. And so that's playing into his accusations in his own lawsuit that he's filing. And I'll remind our viewers, that's one of multiple lawsuits that have been filed by other victims, and we'll see how that plays out. Some of those are still playing out in court. Others have been thrown out. And I should say Combs' attorneys are saying that that victim we just heard from, that he is trying to capitalize on the very public federal case. And he has denied any wrongdoing there as well, Reed. So it's really such a complex web of accusations that we've seen play out. He mentioned over the last 2 years, this has been a big story for more than 2 years now. Up to the judge to decide how much time he will serve.
Apologies, Anna, you froze there for just a second, but we did understand what you had to say. No doubt he's one of thousands of people who are waiting to hear, as you are, what happens in that sentencing hearing happening right now. Anna Schechter, always great to have you break that down for us. We appreciate it. Our team tells us the court is on that lunch break. That will go on until 2 p.m. Eastern. Gives the judge kind of some time to think about some of the testimony from Sean Diddy Combs' family. Let's talk about that. Going live to senior coordinating producer for the Crime and Public Safety Unit, Anna Schechter. Anna, give us a recap of what we've seen inside this morning and how it likely is going to weigh in the judge's mind.
Well, sure. We just heard that his children have spoken very emotionally before the judge, pleading with him to give their father a light sentence. So we heard from the children. We heard from defense attorneys characterizing him as an upstanding member of the community. And they also played an 11-minute video montage of home videos portraying him as a family man. So all of this is going to weigh in. The judge has seen all of this and he will take this into consideration. We also heard from the prosecution. They laid out in great detail their reasoning why they are asking for more than 11 years in prison as the sentence. So the judge said earlier today in court, sentencing guidelines give around 5 to 7 years. So we'll see what the judge decides later this afternoon. As you mentioned, they are on a break right now, and we expect to hear from more defense attorneys as soon as they get back, and then the judge will likely make his decision.
All right, so is there any indication, because you're hearing a lot of pro-Sean Diddy Combs voices in the court before this lunch break, is there any indication that there's going to be a counterpoint on the other side of the break?
Well, it's a great question. We were expecting to hear from a victim under the pseudonym of Mia, who was going to speak for about 5 minutes.
Right.
But she said that she will not be speaking. There was a letter presented to court by the legal defense team, and given that letter, because of the tone of that letter, she has backed out. There was some discussion between prosecutors and defense attorneys and the judge about that earlier this morning. So we shall see. There might be a statement given by a former employee, but all of that is sort of being negotiated, and we're going to hear exactly who will be speaking next as soon as they come back from their lunch break. The judge said that will be at 2 p.m., so in about a half an hour, Reed.
Anna Schechter, watching it all, thank you so much. We appreciate you keeping our national and international audience updated as this plays out. So let's continue the conversation more from a legal perspective. CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi joins us now for more. I haven't talked to you for a while, so first of all, it's great to see you on the screen.
I know.
So Combs' legal
Me
team,
too.
yeah, they really pulled out all the stops right now before this break. What do you make of their tactics? Because with the video, they're kind of showing their cards, their game plan, so to speak. How does the judge weigh all of these statements?
Yeah, they did. They're really laying it on thick. And to be honest, Reed, things like these videos, letters, don't have that much of an impact. What really is the most means the most to a judge in these situations are the sentencing guidelines calculations. And we really got quite a bit of news earlier in the first part of this hearing today, which is that the judge is actually adopting the probation department's view of the sentencing guidelines, which is 70 to 82 months, which, as Anna said, is 5, 6, 7 years in that range. We heard prosecutors were advocating for an 11-year sentence based on the guidelines, and the defense attorneys wanted basically time served, 14 years. But that's all based on their interpretation of what the federal sentencing guidelines say. So now we know that the judge believes that the range in which he should be looking is that 70 to 82 months range. Now, of course, he can depart from that. It's called downward departures or upward departures. The sentencing guidelines are just that. They're advisory. But he'd have to take into consideration all of these things that are being presented by both the prosecution and defense. Prosecutors really want the judge to take into account the violence that he perpetrated, especially that video we saw of Cassie, of him just brutally beating Cassie in 2016. So we'll see how that plays into his analysis of which end of the spectrum he's going to sentence on.
Right, because I was going to ask you, if it looks like it's going to be sentencing guidelines sort of guiding the judge as to what decision is made and not perhaps some of those more positive family-oriented videos and pleadings that we saw before the break. Does that same sort of thinking come in line with the beating video that went viral all over the world and then was presented in court?
Yeah, look, you have lawyers arguing for what are called 3553A departures, so either aggravating or mitigating circumstances. I mean, that video showed his philanthropic work, how dedicated he was as a father, things like that. I mean, those would be mitigating circumstances. Aggravating circumstances obviously would be his history of drug use, domestic violence. However, they've countered that by saying he's gotten clean in prison, he is committed to a life free of crime, and he will continue working with a therapist and or doctors to continue on this path. So, it's really, sentencing is both really a science and an art, and there's a lot of discretion for the judge here. I think it depends on which version of events and which sort of version of Sean Combs he sees that will impact whether or not he really deviates much from that guidelines range.
A lot of eyes on the guidelines and the events and also the judge. It's so great to talk to you. Hope to see you back here very soon on CBS News 24/7. You have a good weekend, my friend.
CBS News national correspondent Jerika Duncan has been closely following the story from the start, and she is outside the courtroom joining us now live here. Jerika, what has played out in court so far?
Most recently, 6 of Sean Combs' 7 children gave statements on behalf of their father. One that I thought was very notable. I mean, all of them at points in time sort of broke down and cried or had a hard time getting those statements out. But Delilah, one of the twins, 18 years old, she said, "Your Honor, please give our family the chance to heal together and move forward, not as headlines, but as human beings trying to do better." That was sort of the sentiment from all of his children. He's our dad. We need him. We want him home. We've seen a change. We hope you'll find it basically in your heart to see the good that he's done to try and transform and evolve so that he doesn't have to spend more time behind bars.
And Jerika, Combs there has also asked to speak at today's sentencing, hasn't done so yet, but do we have a sense of what he is going to say?
So there was a heavily produced video that was shared, about 11 minutes, and it really showcased another version of Combs that we didn't hear about during that trial in terms of the philanthropy work, him as a father, him as someone that wants to give back and help the community. So we know that the judge saw that video, and his letter was submitted, Combs' letter was submitted yesterday. So again, the judge got an opportunity even before Combs is likely to speak those words out loud in court. Even before hearing from him, he did see the nearly 4 pages basically admitting some fault, saying sorry for the hurt and pain that he has caused, that there was no one to blame but himself. He says, as it pertains to Cassie, the scene and images of me assaulting Cassie play over and over in my head daily. Again, this is according to that letter that he submitted to the court. He said, I literally lost my mind, in reference to the incident involving Cassie. As for Jane, he said, I thought I was providing for Jane concerning her and her child, but after her testimony, I realized that I hurt her. And for those who weren't following this case intently, Jane is someone who went by that pseudonym, but also an ex-girlfriend of Sean Combs.
And Jerika, we're also hearing from the people affected by Combs' actions. 2 of his accusers submitted impact statements to the judge. One of them, a woman, was supposed to speak, later changed her mind. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yeah, so Mia was supposed to speak. This is someone who used to work for Combs, and the defense characterized her testimony as lying, a false demeanor, they said, and her voice, basically saying that she put on an act inside that courtroom when she testified. And even the judge went as far as to acknowledge that it was inappropriate, some of the comments that were made from the defense in response to the letter that Mia submitted. But we know Deontay Nash, a former stylist for Combs, also submitted a letter, and that he talks about being afraid of Combs and saying that He believes that Combs damaged the futures of people in his past, present, and likely future. He said, quote, I do expect him to be in jail, or rather, I do not expect him to be in jail forever, but I am praying for a sentence, he said, that allows the victims to heal and encourages Mr. Combs to genuinely change. And a statement from Cassie Ventura, the star witness in that 8-week trial. She said, quote, I am so scared that if he walks free, his first actions will be swift retribution towards me and others who spoke up about his abuse at trial. So naturally, you're hearing from both sides. The judge will ultimately have the final say, and we hope to hear his decision in the coming hours. Nancy?
A monumental day for so many. Jerika, thank you very much. We'll check back in with you again soon.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm John Dickerson. Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs was just sentenced to more than 4 years in prison. The 55-year-old was convicted back in July on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Combs had pleaded not guilty to all charges and was acquitted of 2 more serious charges, sex trafficking and racketeering, which would have led to a potential life sentence. Moments before he was sentenced, Combs apologized for his disgusting, shameful, and sick behavior. Those are his characterizations. Our Jerika Duncan is outside the courthouse. Jerika has covered this case from the beginning. Jerika, your thoughts?
This was the most important day of this case, and Combs did give a statement about 12 minutes long where he spoke directly to the court. He talked about being personally responsible and apologized for what happened with his ex-girlfriends, Cassie Ventura and Jane. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and he said moments ago, I want to personally apologize to all of the victims of domestic violence. He said, quote, I hate myself right now. I was stripped to nothing. And when it comes to that video of him beating Cassie, he said, I was sick on drugs. I was out of control. I needed help. I make no excuses. I knew better. But the judge had some very sharp words in response to Combs. He acknowledged that he is trying to do better and told him that he hopes that he continues that, but instantly went into rejecting attempts to characterize what happened as, quote, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. He said, you abused your power and control you had over women you claimed you had loved. You abused them emotionally and physically. He said the evidence was massive. I was sitting right here, he said. We read it and we saw it. Images of gashes and bruises and broken doors, and I saw it in the video. It was savage. This is according to the judge. This is some of the comments that he made just moments ago in court. Alice Gaynor from WCBS is in the courtroom right now and sending out notes just to give us a sense of what Combs' demeanor is like right now. What is his family reacting to? I also want to note something that the judge mentioned in reference to Jane. She went by the pseudonym Jane, but this was also an ex-girlfriend. He said he referred to the brutal assault of Jane by saying, you kicked down 5 doors in her home, lifted her off the floor by her neck, punched her, kicked her, dragged her by her hair, slapped her so hard she fell down. Jane, quote, her credibility testified to those things, that she was a credible witness. So some sharp words, again, from the judge who just handed down that sentence, 50 months in prison. There will be time served, we believe, in consideration of that. So considering that, it might actually be 4 years. I'm just looking at a note, sentence is 50 months of incarceration. Agnifilo, which is the lead attorney for Combs, asking for more time to list facility recommendations. Also supervised release, 5 years. No reaction from Combs. He is still sitting, and there's a $500,000 fine. You can see behind me a little bit the crowd that has been gathered here pretty much all day as the family had been in and out of that courtroom. When I asked a couple of the defense attorneys how they were feeling today, they didn't have a comment. This day was very serious. They knew that going in. Not long ago in July, when it was that split verdict, they said this was a win for Combs. But the second part of that, the most important part of that, is the sentencing happening today. Again, the judge sentencing him to 50 months behind bars.
Jerika, what other activity did we have today? Did we hear there were the victim statements? Was this a part of today's activities? And also, did the judge make any characterization of the final sentence relative to those harsh words that you that you quoted him as saying? In other words, did he match the two up? Did he say, I'm delivering this very harsh characterological verdict on you, and the sentencing matches that, or did he just not make that connection?
No, he did acknowledge that the sentence that prosecutors were asking for, 11 years, was a bit of an overreach. The probation report recommended 60 months. So when you look at the probation report of 60 months, he comes up with 50 months. The prosecutors wanted 11 years behind bars. It's not quite in the middle, but it's a far cry from the 14 months that the defense was asking for. Some other things worth noting. Combs was found guilty on the 2 counts of the Mann Act. This is transportation of people across state lines for the purpose of prostitution, and that is illegal in this country. Prosecutor Christy Slavic at one point during this testimony said that this case was not just about prostitution, but violence. She emphasized the violence. And that is what we heard a little bit from the judge today when he recanted some of the testimony that we heard during the trial. Cassie Ventura, the star witness, the ex-girlfriend of Combs, who was with him for about 10 years, released a statement before this sentencing was handed down saying, I am so scared that if he walks free, his first actions will be swift retribution towards me and others who spoke about him at this trial.
All right, Jericka Duncan, thank you so much. Criminal defense attorney Caroline Polisi is with us. Caroline, what's your reaction to this judgment?
I think this is about as good of a sentence that Sean Combs and his lawyers could have hoped for. They did ask for 14 months, which is essentially time served. But when probation came in with that assessment, which was 60 months to 72 months, clearly the judge took that into consideration. Now, he downwardly departed from that, meaning I think 2 things are to note here that you heard the judge say there. One is that a sentence should be sufficient but not greater than necessary to achieve the ends of justice. And so you'll often hear defense attorneys saying that. The second is that similarly situated defendants, you want no discrepancies in similarly situated defendants. When you look at all of the Mann Act guilty verdicts sort of in this jurisdiction, this is a pretty high sentence. And so I think the judge didn't want to get out of that heartland of the sentences while taking into account the violence here. That's the biggest issue here.
Well, right. So on the one hand, you're saying Joe Schmo comes in, has a Mann Act violation. You want the sentences to be the same to hold up that important judicial principle that all people are. On the other hand, the judge, as Jericka went through, went on at some length about all of this other material and all of the stuff the judge mentioned. Is that a part of the Mann Act charge, or is that...
Interesting. So it's not. So remember, it was a huge win for his defense when he was acquitted of those sex trafficking charge, which is essentially a Mann Act charge with the element of violence. And the defense actually raised a constitutional argument here in their brief, saying that, look, if you consider that conduct, the violence, the coercion that was presented by the prosecution, that's actually going against what the sentencing guidelines recommend or state, that you can't consider acquitted conduct. Essentially, he was found not guilty of that conduct, so why consider it in the sentence? The judge setting some precedent here, saying, absolutely, I can consider the evidence that was produced at trial. It's not necessarily going against those acquittals. There was obviously evidence of violence here. You can take into account his character, his demeanor. This has always been a tale of 2 different Sean Combs. The defense wants to portray him as, a lost man who has trauma issues since his father was murdered at the age of 3, with addiction issues, struggling to get by. The prosecution paints him as sort of a nefarious, devious, really serial perpetrator of violence.
So in the end here, you mentioned that the defense team will be happy with this verdict.
Oh, well, look, I mean, they wanted him to walk out. I think Agnifilo said, today we want to walk out. I think they may appeal on the constitutional grounds, on the grounds that they're going to say that the judge took into account this acquitted conduct and that they should only be looking at the actual violations of the Mann Act.
So just to catch people up with that, so if it comes out in trial that you did X, Y, and Z, but you are then acquitted of the charges in which that information came out, the defense's argument will be the judge can't take that into consideration.
Exactly.
Even though it was talked about and everybody knows about it, can't do it. That would be their grounds.
Exactly, because you weren't found guilty of that offense. They haven't proven it by beyond a reasonable doubt. However, forever, sentencing judges can take into account prior bad acts if they find by a preponderance of the evidence that those were committed. And so it's kind of a gray area there. But clearly this judge did take those factors into account to some degree, but then mitigated it as well to keep it within those, to keep things a little bit more consistent in terms of, similarly situated defendants.
All right, Caroline Polisi, thank you. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman was inside the overflow courtroom as the sentencing was read and is now outside for us. Katrina, what did you make? What's your reaction? What did you witness?
I mean, what was striking when the sentence was finally read is how still Sean Combs was. He just sat there, his hands clasped, looking down, and it was such a contrast to earlier because I would say it was such an emotional day in that courtroom. When Sean Combs' kids spoke in court today, they were all crying. His lawyer, Nicole Westmoreland, was crying. Sean Combs got up there and said his own words, and his voice was really shaking. He was very emotional as he told the judge how this had affected his life, how he felt like a changed man. And even when the judge read this sentence, he began by praising Sean Combs, by talking about the work that he's done, the barriers that he's broken, how impressive it is, even at a young age, having lost his father, all that he overcome. But he said that all of that could not wash away the record of this case, the evidence that we saw in that courtroom. He also pointed to the fact that some of this aggravating behavior, the violence, took place even after Combs already knew that he was being investigated. And after that Intercontinental video that we've seen so many times, Sean Combs posted this apology on Instagram. The judge said, saying a lot of what he said in the courtroom today, and yet even after that, he beat one of the women who testified in this trial. So the judge was just not convinced that his behavior had changed, and he said that this had to be done for deterrence. And Sean Combs just really sat there looking defeated. He told us in court today that he was broken. He looked absolutely distraught when his kids were speaking earlier. He was crying. He was wiping his face with a tissue. And you can see really how all of this has affected him. And now he is going to have to deal with this incarceration.
And in the judge's remarks, you mentioned that, Katrina, that he started off and he sort of had a trail of the way he. How long did he speak for? And was he pretty much monotone the whole way, or did the judge betray any emotion in his remarks?
No, I would say that there absolutely was, and I can't say how long because he was actually still speaking as I left the courtroom. He was praising the women who came and testified in this trial and the courage that it took for them to do that as I walked out. But you could absolutely hear emotion in his voice when he was talking about all of the things that Sean Combs has accomplished. You could tell that, he is very impressed by all that he has done, by the work that he is continuing to try to do in the prison system. But all of that just was not enough to overcome the massive amount of evidence that he said we saw in this case, the violence, the extreme nature of the behavior, the length of this behavior. It happened over a decade with multiple victims, and all of that just was not enough to supersede him saying that he now feels remorseful for this, that he is repentant. And earlier in the day, the judge also said that he just wasn't fully convinced by the narrative that Sean Combs and his team have been saying.
CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman, thank you. We want to go back to Jerika Duncan, who's outside the courthouse. Jerika, there are always in these high-profile trials people who gather around, who kind of come and pick sides. What has the reaction been in the wake of this sentencing?
I think you have people that have been out here, some that support Combs and are saying things like free Diddy, and then you have folks who are advocates and wanted to see him face some serious time. An attorney that I did speak to did make clear, though, that a lot of times in these federal cases, people don't necessarily serve the entire time. So again, Combs has already been behind bars for a little over a year. Then there's, I was told, 15% off for good behavior, sometimes 15% off the sentence. There's First Step Act credits to consider. There's a certain percentage that you can do for halfway house or home confinement and possibly additional time off for drug treatment programs. So in the end, we don't know exactly what that really looks like in terms of how much more time Combs will spend behind bars. But again, this judge trying to send a message saying that what he did was wrong and that he did believe the credibility of those women who testified. Court just adjourned, but I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts from the judge. He looks over at Combs and says, you are going to get through this. There is light at the end to help people like him. You will have a chance, he says, to show your children and the world that accountability and change is possible.
Jericka Duncan from outside the courthouse, Jericka, thank you so much.